Follow implicit differentiation. Find dy dx if a x cosine y plus y cosine x equals 1. First, we have the product of two functions. For that, we'll use this rule to make the differentiation. If we have the product of two functions, then d dx f of x multiply g of x, it's equal fx dot g dash x plus gx dot f dash x, which means the first function multiply the derivative of the second function multiply the derivative of the first. So we will use the same rule. The first multiply the derivative of the second plus the second multiply the first, the derivative of the first. Okay, let us start with this. So a, to find dy dx, as the rule, the first function is x, multiply the derivative of the second. What is the derivative of cosine y? It is negative sine y dot dy dx. It is the first multiplies the derivative of the second plus the second function, it is cosine y, multiply the derivative of the first. What is the first here? It is x. What is the derivative of x? Is 1. So the derivative of x cosine y equals x dot negative sine y dy dx plus cosine y multiply 1, plus we have another two functions, the product of two functions, y cosine x. So we'll set when you make the differentiation, the first function multiply the derivative of the second, which equal negative sine x, plus the second function here is cosine x, multiply the derivative of the first, which equal dy dx equals 0. The required here is to find the dy dx. So we simplify, we have here, and we arrangement. So left hand side will be negative x sine y dy dx plus cosine y minus y sine x plus cosine x dot dy dx equals 0. So by taking dy dx as a common factor, what we have, dy dx multiply negative x sine y plus cosine x plus cosine y minus y sine x, all of this equals 0. Now it is easy to separate dy dx. The first step, we write dy dx multiply negative x sine y plus sine x plus cosine x equals positive y sine x minus cosine y. So dy dx equals y sine x minus cosine y over cosine x minus x sine y. And this is the final answer. B, 3y equals sine x cosine 2y. Here also we have the product of two functions. The first is sine x and the second is cosine 2y. So by differentiate both sides with respect to x, what we get? 3 dy dx equals, the first is sine x multiply the derivative of cosine 2y. The derivative of cosine 2y is negative sine 2y multiply the derivative of the angle itself, which equal 2 dy dx plus the second cosine 2y, the second function of course, multiply the derivative of the first. The derivative of sine x is cosine x. And now we simplify it to take the form negative sine x sine 2y. First we write 2 here, 2 sine x sine 2y dot dy dx plus cosine 2y cosine x, it is equal 3 dy dx. Then we collect dy dx in one term. We collect dy dx in the left hand side, so we have 3 dy dx plus 2 sine x sine 2y dy dx equals cosine 2y cosine x. And by taking dy dx as a common factor, what we get? We will get dy dx multiply 3 plus 2 sine x sine 2y sine 2y and we close the bracket, which equal cosine 2y cosine x. So dy dx, we make a division, equals in the numerator cosine 2y dot cosine x over 3 plus 2 sine x sine 2y. And this is the final solution. C, x cosec y equals y cotan x. Also the required is to find the dy dx, and we have the product of two functions. So by differentiate the both sides with respect to x, we will get x multiply the derivative of cosec y is negative cosec cotan cosec y cotan y, but don't stop here, dot dy dx, the derivative of the angle itself, plus the second function, which equal cosec y multiply the derivative of the first, which equal 1. That's equal, the first is y multiply the derivative of cotan is negative cosec square x, plus the second, it is cotan x multiply the derivative of the first, the derivative of y with respect to x is dy dx. And then we simplify both sides, so we will have negative x cosec y cotan y dot dy dx plus cosec y equals negative y cosec square x plus cotan x dy dx. So we'll put dy dx in one side, let it the right hand side, and left hand side we will have cosec y plus y cosec square x equals cotan x dy dx plus x cosec y cotan y dy dx. So cosec y plus y cosec square x equals, by taking dy dx as a common factor, dy dx, we will have cotan x plus x cosec y dot cotan y. Now dy dx equals and this is the final result.